Welcome to be a Mensch. We have been studying Pirkei Avot, which is ethics of our fathers, the section of the Mishnah, the section of the Talmud, in which they enumerate or select specific quotes from each sage, and they specifically with regards to morality and ethics, and like we told the class, being a Mensch. This morning we'll be learning chapter 2, Mishnah Gimel. Chapter 2, the third Mishnah, which if you have the book, this book will be on page 52. And before we dive into it, I wanted to, of course, make note of the fact that yesterday, which was Shabbat, we began the custom of reading this, or studying this, which is Pirkei Avot, each Shabbat, between Pesach and Shavuot. And the Chabad custom is actually that we do it through the summer. But certainly between Pesach and Shavuot, there are 6 Shabbats because there are 7 weeks in total. So there's always 6 Shabbats in between. So each of those 6 Shabbats, we study one chapter of the 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot, from chapter 1 through chapter 6. So yesterday we studied chapter 1, and next week we would study chapter 2. Obviously, it wouldn't be done as in depth as we're doing it. We've been at it 7 months. We've only gotten through about one chapter. Right. So today we're going to do Mishnah Gimel, the third Mishnah. We are still quoting Rabbi Gamliel, who we introduced at the beginning of last Mishnah as the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. If you'll recall, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the author of the Mishnah, or the compiler of the Mishnah, had 2 sons, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Gamliel, and Rabbi Gamliel is the one that was chosen as the leader of the Jewish people, and therefore we're quoting him. We quoted one thing last week, and today we will be quoting a brand new statement. Why don't we get started by reading that? Arnold, you wanna lead us off?
Okay, let me put on my glasses.
Oh.
Okay. Don't rely on them. The only one person.
No. Start at the top with the Mishnah itself. Beware.
Okay, yeah. Beware of those in power, because they befriend the person only for their own needs. They appear to be close friends as long as they have what to gain from that person. But they will not stand by a person to help him in his time of need.
Pretty straightforward statement.
All too true.
Right, all too true. Pretty straightforward statement. By the way, which is part of why tonight, this morning's class is going to be a shorter class than usual. It's a short Mishnah. It does seem pretty self-evident, but there's one major thing we need to discuss. Ron, any ideas what that is?
Nope.
Anybody's memory? Anybody remember discussing something like this before?
Paying attention in class.
Anybody remember something like this before? All the way at the beginning of Pirkei Avot, I will find exactly which Mishnah it is. Hold on. While we were still in the generation of the peers, in other words, when the leaders of the Jewish people were 2 sages at a time, and we would talk then about how one of them was the political leader and one of them was the Torah leader at the time. You have a peer of people called Shmaya and Avtalyon. Shmaya and Avtalyon. So I think it's only Ron that has this book, but even for those that don't have the book, it's in chapter 1, Mishnah 10, so page 26. Shmaya and Avtalyon received the teachings of the Torah from Yehuda ben Tabai and Shimon ben Shattach, and Shmaya says, you should love work and not consider yourself too important to work. Hate positions of power. Sna es harabanus, and do not become too friendly with those in power. So number 1, hate positions of power. And number 2, do not become too friendly with those in power. Let's contrast that versus the Mishnah that we're studying today, which says beware of those in power. It does not say to hate the idea of power, but beware of those in power, right? Yeah. And at the same time, whereas he said, sorry, let me just turn back 1 second. What was the end of his statement? Don't become too close with those in power. Here he seems to be implying by the end of his Mishnah, where he says they appear to be a close friend, he's like giving you advice how to navigate it. It would seem that he's saying you should interact with them. Okay? So certainly, even at a very basic level, he's taking a different approach than Shmaya took. He is certainly saying, where Shmaya said, get away from it. Power is, I don't know, there's lots of English expressions about this, and none of them are popping into my mind right now. But power is money hungry. It's the people who just want to use you. They just want to get whatever they want to get. If you're the key to their success, then they'll be friends with you. If not, they won't, right? And even while he says this, right, Gamliel is not disagreeing with Shmaya on the general principle that power can drive people to terrible things, etc. He's not doing that. However, what he is doing is he's saying, beware. He's not saying hate it and stick away from it at all costs. He's saying beware. Whereas Shmaya said completely stick away from it. So that's just something interesting to point out, that there were two different approaches when it came to this. It would seem that Rabbi Gamliel took this from his personal experience. We've learned already a little bit about Rabbi Gamliel and how he led the Jewish people, but he believed that living under a foreign power, you have to be able to beseech before them, to ask before them, to rely on the government for certain things, etc. He is making it absolutely clear it's not a desirous position. A person shouldn't want to be in power. And more importantly than that, even when you're dealing with people in power, you have to be extremely cautious. Let's see some times in history when this actually came about. Official, you want to read for us? Don't rely on them.
Don't rely on them. The only one a person must put his trust in is, of course, Hashem. We shouldn't think that because an important government official is on our side, we are in safe hands. Our safety and salvation comes only from Hashem. So when we see difficult times and we are in need of help, we must first increase our Torah learning, add in our performance of mitzvahs with care, and call out to Hashem. Only once we've done all that should we turn to our friends in government for aid. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, till the end here, till right here.
Okay, all the way. All right.
We learned from the story.
We learned this from the story of Purim. When Mordecai heard of the evil decree against the Jewish people, his first step was to walk the streets in sackcloth and ashes to provoke the Jews to do teshuvah. He also gathered 22,000 children and learned Torah with them. Only afterward did he go to the palace to enlist Esther to plead with the king on behalf of her people in the same way. In the same way, Esther asked that all Jews fast on her behalf for 3 days, and only after would she go to Ashashverosh, their friend in government.
Was the king at the time, yeah, the friend in government, right? So we're all familiar with the Purim story. Perhaps we're not all familiar with these medrashim, with these different commentary that he's quoting here. He's quoting commentary which mention that Mordecai, as he was attempting to, he was the leader of the Jewish people at the time, right? Story of Purim, Haman wants to wipe out the Jewish people, etc. What he does, as is depicted so beautifully in this image here, Mordecai does two things. Number one is he takes a spiritual approach. How can we gather children and study with them? How can we fast? And Mordecai and Esther both together took a spiritual approach. How can we make sure that we're doing what we need to do in order to rely on Hashem and not rely on human beings? However, of course, they needed to do their part. So therefore they said, okay, we're going to go to the king. And Esther was in a position of power, and she was able to beseech on their behalf, and she did, and that's actually the method through which Hashem chose to bring the salvation to the Jewish people. However, they had a very clear approach, which was relying on Achashverosh is not a good idea. It's not a good idea. By the way, this can even be shown by the historically from Achashverosh's approach to the Jewish people, right? When Haman said, let's destroy the Jewish people, Achashverosh was a big fan of it. And then when Mordecai and Esther eventually, they revealed their true colors and they showed that they were Jewish, and Esther beseeched on behalf of the Jewish people, and yada, yada, yada. After the whole Purim story ends, Mordecai is elevated to the position of second in command. And then Achashverosh goes on to help the Jewish people build the second temple. So he wasn't exactly a stable person, and certainly his approach to the Jewish people was not based on some kind of core fundamental principle which was not able to be changed. He was able to be changed based on the whims of the day and based on the whims of what's going on, because he's a human being. Particularly in his case, we're told that he was not exactly a stable human being. So therefore things changed, right? And this is exactly what Rabbi Gamliel is warning us about in this Mishnah. Political powers are only so valuable as you need something from them, deal with what you need to get from them, etc. One of the commentary that I saw, and it does not, I saw this in the Mishnah at Kahati, I don't remember which commentary it was saying, what does this Mishnah mean? Like how are you How can you be aware? Like, how would this come out practically, right? So let's say Ron is the person who's in power, and I'm talking to Ron, and I'm either having this Mishnah in mind or not having this Mishnah in mind. What would be my different way of interacting with him? So the Mishnah explains that one of the things we like to do with people that are in power is, you like to become buddy with them, and you'll go out to eat with them, and that might be important to achieve whatever you need to achieve. His point is, and the Mishnah says, make sure you're only sharing with them things that are important for that situation. Don't share with them random personal details about your life. You never know when the tides will turn. They will be against you, and then they'll use those details against you. I mean, there's enough stories in history to prove that, Jewish and non-Jewish alike. We all know that. Yes, Fishel, go ahead.
On that note, my aunt told me, if a lawyer asks you, do you have a lighter? Don't tell the lawyer you don't smoke. Say you don't have a lighter.
There you go.
Very minimalistic. Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep going. Let me share the next page. Hold on. How do I do this? New share. Page 2. Where's page 2? Oh, I had it open. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Just bear with me for 1 second. This happens sometimes. I'm just going to open up the second page, like how we can move on. So, new share. Here it is. Did the page change?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, let's see, right? So Rabbi Gamliel has so far taught us two things. Last week we learned from Rabbi Gamliel about the importance, Yafet Talmud Torah and Derech Eretz, the importance of not just being someone who has a lot of Torah study and a lot of Torah knowledge, but also being someone who coupled with that has a good job or has a way of the land or has a way to support themselves, etc. Let's see how those two Mishnahs connect to each other. Ron, do you want to read for us? Connections.
This Mishnah continues from the previous Mishnah in guiding the person involved in communal affairs. Even though they often need to be involved with government officials to service their communities, the Mishnah warns them to bear in mind that contrary to how it may appear, these people act only for their personal interests.
Okay, so this is directly in connection to the previous Mishnah, because the previous Mishnah was telling us that sometimes you gotta be involved in the world. Sometimes you gotta be involved in, I guess, communal affairs is probably the best statement. By the way, between this Mishnah, which is authored by Rabbi Gamliel, and the prior one, which told us to stick away from power at all costs, I mean, and perhaps they're not arguing. Perhaps he's just clarifying his statement. You should hate power in that every time you deal with them, it should be kind of whatever is necessary. But clearly, our approach today, as Jews today, thousands of years later, we take Rabbi Gamliel's approach. I will call your attention to the fact that every week, and we actually read this in English last week, it just goes to show how connected the two Mishnahs really are. We read the prayer that we say on Shabbat afternoon in between Shacharit, the morning services, and Musaf, the afternoon services. So we read about how we thank those that are in positions of community. In other words, community leaders and communal affairs, those that take care of those sorts of things. And this is a very, very valid point, because we need people like that. We need people to intercede on behalf of the Jewish people and to help us with, whatever it is. However, when they do so, they should know they should only deal with government when necessary. All right. We'll conclude with the following idea. Ron, you want to finish off for us? Word power. Sometimes they point out nuances in the words that are being used. So there are different words for power or positions of power. Sometimes it's malchut, which means kind of kingship. Sometimes it's rishut, which means kind of, government or rulership. Those who give the permission to other people. And sometimes it's rabbanut, which means mastery. Let's see the specifics of this Mishnah. Go ahead.
Hovu zehirin berashut. Hashem commanded us to do mitzvot and stay far from averos. There are many things, however, that are neither mitzvot nor averos. These are referred to as
Divrei rishus.
Divrei reshus, permissible things.
So before you continue, the Mishnah specifically here chooses to use the word rishus, which means the best word I can think of is those in government. It means basically those who decide what's permissible and what's not permissible. And the word rishus itself technically means permissibility. So he's saying this is guidance with regards to those things that are neither expressly commanded to do, like to visit the sick, right? That's something we're specifically commanded to do. Or things we're expressly commanded not to do, such as don't steal, right? Then there's the things in between. What do you mean? Am I allowed to eat these pancakes? You know, like what's the deal, right? So the permissible things, what's our guidance? Go ahead.
They include eating, drinking, sleeping, playing, and other neutral activities. About these, the Mishnah teaches Hovu Zeherim Beroshus. Be wary of permissible things. It is not enough to stay away from doing what's forbidden. A Jew must also keep himself from indulging in permissible worldly pleasures. For while these pleasures may appear as a friend and offer an enjoyable experience, they do not stand by him at his time of need. They do not help a person in the things that really matter in his service of Hashem.
Okay, before we talk about this in and of itself, this point, I just want to point out that this is just a word play and it's another layer of meaning here in the Mishnah. Obviously, this is not the simple meaning of the Mishnah. This is not what the Mishnah needs to tell us. That being said, what is this point, which is being quoted from 26? Hold on, I know you guys don't have the book, and I actually wanted to check where this comes from. This is from the Medrash Shmuel, who we've quoted before, and I guess I didn't take a look at this morning when I was preparing the class, so I didn't see this point. What is he telling us? He's telling us, look, we all know what to do in a case where there's an express commandment from the Torah, to do something or not to do something. If the Torah tells us don't do it, we don't do it. Do we slip up sometimes? Yes, but we know what our guidance is supposed to be. When Torah tells us to do something, we know what our guidance is supposed to do. We put on tefillin every day. All right, I miss a day. This, like that's me being human. It's a challenge and it's hard, but I'm supposed to be putting on tefillin every day. What about those things the Torah does not command us about? Everything has details. Like let's take eating as an example, right? Eating is something that, of course, we're supposed to make a blessing before we eat. Of course, we're supposed to make a proper blessing afterwards. But what else? So the Medrash Shmuel shares from us from this Mishnah. He says, "Be careful." That's his main piece of advice. What does that mean? Be careful. Be wary of which one is in control. Is this permissible thing controlling you, or are you controlling this permissible thing? Why do I say that? Because when do problems start to form with these permissible things is specifically when you allow them to control you. I gave the example of pancakes. I'm eating pancakes. Great. You're going to use that energy. You're going to be in control of it. You're going to say, okay, I'm hungry this morning. I am now going to eat pancakes. And therefore, I'm going to use that energy later, like that I can learn Torah, like that I can serve God, like that it can be part of my life, the way I've chosen to live it as a Torah observant Jew and someone who follows the way of Hashem, etc. That's great. When do we have a problem? When I wake up in the morning and I have an intense craving to have pancakes. I'm not even hungry necessarily. It could be I just finished a beautiful breakfast of whatever, cereal or milk, and now I have a craving to have pancakes, and now the pancakes are controlling me. I don't even need this stuff. I'm not going to use this energy for anything. Even if you do go and make a blessing on it and a blessing afterwards, you're not being weary of it. Now, what is so terrible about this? There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with eating pancakes, even if you have a craving for it, and even if it's controlling you, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is the path that you're starting to lead down. I'll never forget that before we get married in religious circles, so we study, the laws of the bedroom, and then we also study the kind of mindset, kind of like the where your mind should be when it comes to these things, what your approach to it, what your approach to it should be. And I'll never forget that there's a book that I was advised by one of my rabbis to study. And of course, that book spoke a lot about, different conduct in the bedroom or interaction between the man and his wife, etc., and where his mind should be and what his mindset towards sexual intercourse should be, etc. No problem. But it's interesting to note that that book has a chapter right before that, okay, which actually deals with specifically food and drink. Not letting food and drink control you, not letting your temptations control you, but rather allowing you to control your temptations. And in that book, he points out that the reason why he does that, he says, is because it never starts just with, somebody's improper sexually. It doesn't start that way, usually. usually it starts with other things in their lives that they can't control themselves on. And I'm not even talking about extreme things such as alcohol or drugs or cigarettes. No. All those things are also terrible to become reliant on that. But way before that, if you walk around about your life and every temptation that you have, you fulfill, every time you want to eat something, every time you want this temptation. By the way, it doesn't just have to be food. Some people have this issue with purchasing things, right? What were you going to say, Brett?
No, I was saying I'm a victim of everything you're talking about.
Oh,
This
no.
right here. I'm fat. Yes.
No. By the way, we're not even talking about. First of all, I'm not familiar with your personal situation. Many people are overweight. It has nothing to do with the fact that they eat too much. And even if they eat too much, it has nothing to do with the fact that they are indulging in temptations that they shouldn't. Sometimes it's also because they become more hungry more often than other people, and that's something that needs to be worked on with the diet or with other things. I'm talking about a mindset.
Don't give him an excuse, Rabbi.
What?
Don't give him an excuse.
Not giving
telling you.
excuses. Not giving excuses.
Specifically, I'm drinking this out of habit. I don't crave it. I don't even. I'm not thirsty for it.
So then that's not what we're talking about. That's not what that's a different issue which can be dealt with.
Thank you.
But I'm talking about by the way something that for instance I for whatever reason don't gain weight that quickly. I can eat and eat more than I need to, and I don't know, maybe I have a fast metabolism. Everybody says different things. Maybe it's just because I'm young. Maybe as I get older I will suffer from that malady, and then I'll have to deal with it when it comes. But what I will say is like this. Temptation is something that we all have an issue with, even if you're only eating a little bit. The question is, how are you eating that? Are you eating that because of temptation and craving, and you're giving into that, and you're allowing that to control you? Or are you, and what's the problem with that? As we said, the moment that it leads to that, the moment that you're already doing that, the next thing might be something that's not allowed.
Sure.
And it never starts, as we say, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, our negative side, never comes to us one day and says, hey, dude, you should go murder XYZ. You should go and sleep with this person's wife. It never happens like that. He starts off by telling you, you should go have a pancake. Why? Are you hungry? No, go have a pancake because, pancakes are delicious, etc. Right? And by the way, it's not always with food and drink. I know I've been giving that example, but to give another example.
Yeah.
Some people, it's not even, we're not even talking about an issue here. Some people buy things because they like them. I must have this car. And even if they work hard and they earn it, which in that way they're doing fine, and they can, and they're not using money that they can't have, etc. But when they do buy that car, how are they buying that car? Is it like, oh my gosh, all my life I wanted a Ferrari and now I have the Ferrari? Or is it, I need wheels to ride around and I want to have a Mensch car, so I'm buying or whatever it is. Even if it's the same Ferrari, by the way, or even if we're not talking about a Ferrari, even if we're talking about a Toyota, and some people are like them, right? So allowing your temptations to control you is a very big issue. And it usually leads to much worse things. And that is the point that the Medrash Shmuel is making here. In this Mishnah, Havu Zehirin Bereshut. Be careful, be wary of those things that are even allowed. Why? Because those things that are allowed, you've got to be careful with them. They look like they're your friend right now. I want to have pancakes, I'm going to have pancakes. I want to have a Ferrari, I'm going to have a Ferrari. But eventually they start to control you and they become your worst enemy.
Andrea.